I'm Tim Haas, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. Why tools? I don't know. I honestly don't know. It started about 30 years ago. I think I made a little table, and I needed to shave off just a little bit of wood. I needed a plane, didn't have one. So that Saturday, I went to the flea market, bought a little plane, took it home and kind of cleaned it up, and I thought, well, this is kind of neat. I hadn't messed with one of those since I was in junior high shop class. And I thought, this is kind of neat, you know. Well, the next weekend I went back and I was looking around, and lo and behold, there's another plane. It's a little different than the one I'd already bought. So I bought it, and as the old saying goes, two or more of anything, you're a collector. Well, you know, a couple hundred planes later and a few other items, here I am. So the collection mostly runs from about 1850 to probably 30, 35, 40, something like that. It's about an 80 or 90 year run of tools. It was kind of the golden age of tools. Stanley came on in about 1856 or 7 and started making rules, started making levels. Eventually they got into planes. But in the 1800s, the carpenters all used these wooden planes that are a big chunk of wood with a steel blade wedged through it, right? You know, we've all seen them. That was the common piece. Carpenters don't really like to change. They're pretty happy with what they've got. It works just fine. Why the heck would I want to change, right? Well, here comes Stanley with these cast iron planes. And cast iron's brittle. It breaks like glass. If you drop it on concrete, trust me, it will break like glass, you know. And so the carpenters are like, well, why would we want to use this? And Stanley says, well, you know, they don't wear out on the bottoms. The wooden planes, the bottoms of them would kind of angle and get dips in them and that sort of thing and get out of true. The metal ones didn't suffer from that. They didn't suffer from the changes in humidity and the weather and that sort of thing. So that was number one. But then what Stanley did was pretty interesting. They started making things pretty. It's just that simple, guys. It's just like a good-looking girl, you know? And I'm telling you, and so all these carpenters are starting to go, well, hey, I can have a pretty plane, and it's better than what old Bob's got over there, you know, right? You know, Carpenter Bob, my buddy over here, he's still using that old wooden version. And so they started making these things pretty, attractive, pleasing to the eye, and people started buying them. It was kind of interesting how it worked. And from there, it just took off. This plane right here got a little brass knob on the front of it. And most of them have wooden knobs. When I saw that at a local flea market, you guys know the horse collars, the horse hames? And they had the little brass knobs on top? That's what I thought it was. I thought, well, somebody stuck one of those on there. And I saw it from across the room. So I go over and look at it, and I realized, no, that's not what that is at all. That's a knob. They call them an oiler knob. And on some wood that had a lot of resin, a lot of sap in it, it was sticky, it was hard to plane, they would oil the wood so it made it nice and slick. So some of these guys with their better mousetrap, here we go, came up with a way to make these little knobs. You put oil in the knob, it's a reservoir. And on this particular one, it's got a spring-loaded button right in the top of it. Looks like a screw. And you push it down, and there's a hole in the bottom of the plane, and oil dribbles down through the hole in the bottom of the plane. Now I can tell you, it took this, normally a $20, $25 plane. And I won't tell you what it's worth, but I'll tell you it's substantially more now because it has that oiler knob. None of the tool manufacturers ever made a plane with an oiler knob on it. They were all aftermarket. There's actually a magazine article written on this particular plane. That is the only knob known to exist by the guy who patented this, and I happen to own it, okay? I picked it up it was under $20. And I just paid the guy what he wanted for it, but it was under 20 bucks. I will tell you, like I said, it's substantially more than that now, okay? So there's the magazine for it, the patent papers, and the actual plane itself. Interesting little things like that. So on the top row up here, I've got some different molding planes that were used to cut various shapes of molding, you know, like baseboard, crown molding, that sort of thing, right? And you may have to cut a piece of it here and then change the blade configuration and change the neck, or cut the next step down on it. You didn't do it all at once necessarily. It was in stages sometimes. Pretty interesting. In this corner right here is a Stanley number 444. It's the only plane ever made that was designed to cut dovetails. And that's what it was designed for, is cut for drawers and that sort of thing. It was the only plane ever made to cut dovetail joints. Okay? No other company ever made one. I've never used it. I don't know how they work. I've heard good and bad, but that's what that was for. So kind of interesting. This is a chaplain's plane. It's just a different patent. Again, a different man's idea of how to make an adjustment work better. These are lady leg calipers. Some people call them dancing leg calipers. These were kind of popular from about 1858 to about 1915, 1920, somewhere in there. It was just a fad, and machinists would make these things, and they're just a caliper, inside or outside. You can turn them this way, and the toes point in. You turn them that way, and the toes are pointing out. So they're inside or outside calipers. They just made them look like women's legs. And some of them are engraved. Some of them have like fishnet stockings on there, or the old button-up boots, you know, how they used to have the shoe hooks and all that stuff. They have that on there. I mean, we still have calipers to this day. They're just not near as good looking as these are, you know. And I will tell you guys, I'm a member of 3 different tool collecting clubs. And believe it or not, there's about 5,000 of us idiots out there in the United States alone. And we have meets, we have, you know, that sort of thing. I've got one 2 weeks from now. I'll be up in Wichita at a tool meet. I'm constantly out looking. This little guy right here that's up on the pedestal here, I don't know if you can see him or not. That's a Stanley number 1. Pretty rare plane. The rule of thumb in the clubs is if you don't have a Stanley number 1, you're just not a real tool collector. You know, you can try, but you're not going to fool anybody. You're not a real tool collector unless you've got at least one of these guys. They are the smallest conventional looking plane that Stanley ever made. Now, Stanley made little block planes and that sort of thing, but that is it. It's 5 1/4 inches long. And again, there are not many of them. The price on antique tools, guys, is just like price on any other antiques. Scarcity, quality. You know, how many did they make? Did they make 10 of them, or did they make 10 million of them, right? Is the quality so-so, or is the quality high? That's what commands the price on these things. As a matter of fact, here. Okay, you guys all have to promise to be very careful with this. I'm going to pass this around. I'll just start it here. That is a little 4-fold, 1-foot ivory rule. So it's made out of elephant ivory, back when it was legal. No. And this is back from the 1800s, okay? This is actual elephant ivory that they used to do. Those command a fairly high price because it's ivory, you know, and they're high quality, right, you know? So tools, for some reason, like I say, I just love them. I think they're beautiful. I love their functionality. I've kind of got that mechanical mindset anyway. It just fits with my personality. I really enjoy these things. Second smallest plane they made was a Stanley number 2. So here's a number 1, here's a number 2. Yeah, they went up to about a number 8 or 9 on the iron side. Then they swapped over and had a whole bunch of weird numbering after that. The number 2C, that corrugated bottom. You see how this one's got a corrugated bottom on them. That's why I laid those on their side. Some planes have a corrugated bottom. Again, to reduce that friction when you're planing. It's supposed to reduce the friction against the wood. The 2Cs, highly sought after. They didn't make many of those. I just sold one last weekend or 2 weekends ago, and I'm keeping this one. But they're highly sought after. These are all circular planes down here. They all look the same probably, but I'm telling you, every one of these is slightly different. On these bottom 2 rows, they're all circular planes. What's a circular plane? Circular plane has got a flexible steel sole on there. You can either bend it and make it go convex or concave. So they didn't really use them for this, but my easy example that I tell people is, say, for the inside of a wagon wheel or the outside of a wagon wheel. Now, they really didn't use them on wagon wheels, so don't quote me on that, okay? But that way you can picture a curved piece of wood. They would either be for the outside, or you could set them to go for the inside, okay? Every one of those are circular planes in one form or fashion. Now we get into some of the fun stuff, guys. This is a nail gun. 1892, a nail gun. And you would put nails in the bin. They would slide down a little chute, and at some point you would finally strike it with a hammer. Pretty cool stuff, but I'm sure it saved your fingertips. I don't know how well it worked, but I'm sure it saved your fingertips a little bit, you know. I've got some mining stuff here. These are just mining lamps, one form or another. The little one in the back there is kind of cool. That's called a sticking Tommy. Sticking Tommies they used them to stick them into the timbers in the mine. And they've got a candle holder on them, and that's what these guys would mine by. It's pretty amazing to see this stuff. I've got a couple of these small little alcohol flame ones here. I can tell you this larger one here has been in my family for over 100 years. That's kind of cool. Various hammers. Every trade had its own hammer. So the flooring guys had a hammer, the framers had a hammer, the trim carpenters had a hammer, right? Everybody had their own hammer. Silversmiths, goldsmiths, jewelers, everybody had their own hammer that they used. So there are guys out there who collect nothing but hammers. Obviously, I don't suffer from that. I am not so narrow-minded. Big, broad view. So, but like, this is a pretty cool one here. It actually has a nail holding feature right up here in the crotch of the hammer. It's got a nail holding feature. What the heck is that for? It's so you can start that thing way up here, one-handed, turn around and drive that same nail while you're holding on for dear life over here, okay? Or whatever, right, you know? So pretty handy little feature sometimes if you're holding on for dear life, okay? But I've got all kinds of hammers over here. The round one, it looks like a hockey puck on a stick. That's a macadamizing hammer. You guys can Google John Macadam. He was a guy that lived back, Scottish guy, 70, 80. Basically, he invented asphalt, what we call asphalt, okay? You guys have heard of a macadam road. It's the old oil and gravel on the road. That's the process he invented. Why that round hockey puck looking thing on a stick? They used to give those to the prisoners in prison. You've heard about guys working on the rock pile in prison or working on the road crew in prison. They would take big rocks, beat them into little rocks, spread them out here, put some oil out there, and they were working on the roads. And that was their job, 8 or 10 hours a day, whatever the prison said. So that's probably, been in the hands of a prisoner. I mean, we can only assume, These are all English planes. They are beautiful. They're all walnut infill. They're gorgeous. They're heavy. They're a lot heavier than an American plane. I think they slice the wood a lot nicer because, once you get it moving, the momentum from that just kind of slices right through everything. The solid brass one in front is actually a Scottish plane. It's a funny story. I got that at an auction, an out-of-state auction, years ago. The guy that I was bidding against had been at my house the night before. I fed him a steak dinner. He's sitting on the same row of the auction that I am. We're both on the front row. This thing comes up, and somebody starts bidding, and I start bidding, and he starts bidding, and neither one of us know we're bidding against each other. And finally, about the same time, we both looked up and looked at each other, and he goes, "Hoss, is that you bidding on that?" And I said, "Yes." And this guy's a millionaire. There's no way I could bid against him, And he goes, "Oh, hell, you can have it." He says, "I already ran the price up too much anyway." And I'm like, thanks a lot, Bill. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate that, So, okay, saws. Who doesn't love a saw, So the ones with the giant teeth here in front and this big tiller handle back here, that is an ice saw. Probably came from the Northeast, probably for commercial ice industry, where they get out on the frozen lakes and really cut up the big chunks, take it to the ice house and that sort of thing. The smaller one over here in this right-hand corner is a handsaw version. That's a good old Okie boy version right there. That's where we cut the ice off the farm pond so the cows can drink. This, again, is just a big crosscut saw for the logging industry. This is a one-man crosscut saw in the middle here. And then down at the bottom, I've got a couple of stair saws. They're just neat-looking little wooden saws. The blades go up and down on these things. Here's what I think they were for. You guys are all builders, right? They're all some builders in the room and stuff, people that kind of know about stuff. So on stairs, you've got your risers and your treads, but you got your stringers on the side, right, everybody? I think these were for cutting out the stringers, cutting out the dados on the stringers for the treads and risers to go in because they'll cut to a certain depth. Is what they do. Guys, I have to tell you, I'm kind of assuming that. I don't know that for a fact. I've yet to ever be able to find out how those things worked. But I think you can preset the depth, you cut to that depth, and you stop. And I think that's what it was for, and I think you would then chisel out the rest of the dado. But again, I'm guessing. They're just cool looking. I had to have them. I had to have them. Tape measures. Look at this little guy here in my pocket. How cool is that, huh? Yeah, if I really squeeze it, I'm squeezing it a little bit. If I was to squeeze it, it'd go shooting out of here like a snake, and so it'd probably scare you to death, So this thing just is opposite of what we have today. Today, they automatically retract, right? This one automatically extends. It's trying, but anyway, it automatically extends. There it goes. So how cool is that? 1921, 1922. We can pass it around. Just squeeze right there just a little bit. You guys see all my balances up here. By the way, you guys know what the difference between a balance and a scale is? The scale, you put something on it, and it mechanically tells you the weight, right? Like a bathroom scale. A balance, you put something over here, then you put weights of a known size over here until you get it to balance. So, we hear the scales of justice. That's really not an accurate, it's the balance of justice. It's what it truly is. That's not quite an accurate statement. So these are all analytical balances up here. Very, very sensitive. A friend of mine up in Denver told me he was in college, they taught him to use these. That's what he learned in college. He said the professor had them weigh, him and his table buddies there, weigh a postage stamp and find the weight of that postage stamp. Then once they had found that, he said they took it out, pulled a pencil out of their pocket, drew a pencil line across it, put it back in, and re-weighed it. And so what they were actually weighing was the weight of that little bit of graphite on that thing. And they were sensitive enough to pick it up. So the weight sets, I've got some of the weight sets over here. And some of the weights, these little penny weights, are just like a little snippet of tin foil. Little bitty speck of foil almost, okay? Well, here's the problem. If I reach in and pick up that weight with my finger and drop it on there, the oil from my fingerprints just changed the weight of that, right? So they put tweezers in there in these kits. The problem was you'd pick them up and it didn't weigh anything and they couldn't get it to turn loose. It wouldn't turn loose, okay? It had static cling. So you know what they did? They put ivory tips on the tweezers. And I've got some over here because the ivory doesn't conduct that static cling. And so they would pick them up with those ivory tip tweezers and then they could drop it right where they needed to. Kind of ingenious. Again, they did what they had to do with the tools they had, So in this corner cabinet over here, you're going to see tape measures. You're going to see some jeweler's tools. You'll see some weight sets. My uncle was a jeweler right down here on Main Street for 40 years or so. I don't know how long he was down there. How long was he down? Benny Martin, but he was down there forever, wasn't he? And that was my uncle. And so I kind of got the bug from him on some of the jeweler's tools. And so I've got a few jeweler's tools over here. Now, I have to admit right now, guys, as much as I've talked about all the rest of this stuff, I'm a level head. I am really a level addict, okay? I cannot lie. I love levels. On this shelf here, I've got all these little bitty string levels. They're all from early. They're all in their original packaging. I love original packaging. I think it's too cool. I've got one back here that's about this long, line level. It's the only one I've ever seen. Now, I found some advertising for it. I found the original patent papers for it. Never found anything else other than that. I don't know anybody else that owns one. Never seen another one in my 30 years of collecting. So, is it worth anything? I don't have a clue. Couldn't tell you. Underneath here, I've got some chisels. Again, I've got a box of them that are still in their original box. 1800s, pretty neat stuff. I've got a couple of big ones over here. They call them slicks. I think a slick was any chisel that was 2 inches wide or wider. They considered to be a slick. A slick you never hit with a hammer. The slick, you were the hammer when you used a slick. So they were a very, very sharp chisel. Used them on very large timbers, like for timber framing, for log homes, that sort of thing. And you would put them against your hip here, and you would push. And that you were the power behind it. But they were so sharp they would just shave that wood. And I've seen them used by guys that really know what they're doing. I don't. Again, I'm a collector, more than anything. But they are just a joy to watch these things. So in this cabinet, again, various tools. I like variety. I like smalls. So I've got speed indicators that you would put up against a pulley wheel. to see how many RPMs that pulley was turning. I've been told that these are the most gruesome tool in my exhibit right here. And these are tooth keys, they call them. They're for your teeth. Yeah, they call them a tooth key, but what they were, and there's a picture back here behind where you can kind of see, they would put that in, if you had a tooth that wasn't feeling so well, they'd put that thing in there and it clamps on kind of like a plumber's wrench, a basin wrench, if you guys know what those are. And it hooks onto that tooth and they would sit there and kind of rack it back and forth and loosen the tooth up before they reached in with those bent pliers and pulled it out. So it was just to loosen the tooth, you know. I've got panel gauges up here. This is kind of a neat panel gauge. Now, panel gauge is just a way to scribe a line on a large piece of wood, okay? This one's kind of neat because the guy was obviously a mason, Masonic mason. Because if you look at right up here where you tighten the screw up, he has a sterling silver, the compass and square of the masons up there. So it's obviously a handmade tool. He was obviously a mason. Down here, some more drills again, guys, of all various shapes and sizes. I have to tell you, I'm also a bit of a nut when it comes to what they call a drill index, and that's these little gadgets that hold the drills, like this. It'll hold 30 or 40. They made them in all different shapes and sizes and colors, and I want to have every one. I'm sorry, I do. So again, it is an illness, I know. So some what we call egg beater drills, the old drills that did like this, right? There's a standard brace like this. By the way, this is the first cordless drill. Just don't let anybody tell you any different. This is your first cordless drill right here, okay? So I've got some draw knives down here, some spoke shaves, just like a small version of a draw knife, and they used them more on spokes for the wheels or for a chair back, whatever they were, anything like that they were using them on. Move over here. These are some of my rules. You notice I say some because I've got 2 or 3 times this many. But this is some of my rules. I've had some people say, well, that one's warped. And it's not warped. What that is for is that's a tailor's rule. So if I'm making you a set of clothes, it follows the contour of your chest or your back, either one, a little better, gives a little better measurement. So that's an actual Lufkin, still in business to this day, Lufkin tailor's rule is what that is. There's some pretty neat ones in here. I've got drafting rules in here. I've got rules with board scales on them over here that show the number of board feet. They made these things in all sorts of different varieties. You could get them. You could go to Stanley and you could say, I want metric on one side and I want American on the other side and I want half the American to be board feet or whatever. You could have it made however you want it. They would custom make those for you. So kind of neat stuff. Some just different squares. And bevel gauges down here, some more planes. Who knew? More planes, right? So one of these planes has got a gauge on it, what they call a plane gauge. And it's just a fence. So you can plane to a certain edge, and you're not just going willy-nilly across the top of something. You're just staying right where you want it to, okay? You can also chamfer that way. You can make an angle that way. This is kind of a tool. It's from an ophthalmologist. I bought it and a whole bunch of stuff at a garage sale one day. And I rewired it all. That's all new wiring, even though it looks very old. But the chin would go on the other end, and the eye doctor would look through here. It's just a neat piece. It's a universal ophthalmometer. 1907, I think it is the patent date on there. And I love this old diploma right behind it. It's from the Missouri School for the Blind. I just thought that was too cool. I had to have it and had to throw it in there. So, all right, we're heading this way. So over here, there are 3 tools, guys, in this collection that do not belong to me. And there's these 3 pedal-powered right here. They belong to a dear friend of mine named Forrest Miller. Forrest lives in Tulsa. And Forrest collects the treadle-powered and the pedal-powered items much more than I do, okay? These are all original. They're beautiful. They've got original pinstriping on the paint. Absolutely gorgeous. And this is only a small sampling of what Forrest has too, because he is bitten with the same bug that I am. Let's talk about the toolbox here. This is cool. I've just got to tell you guys. This is one of my favorite pieces. I bought this in a local antique shop, this toolbox. I've never seen one with this double lid setup like this has. But this is the neat stuff right here. So this guy is showing off his ability. This is his calling card. If you're looking for a carpenter to come work in your house, let me tell you, these guys didn't care what the outside of these toolboxes look like. Most of them are painted gray. Most of them are really ugly on the outside. They didn't care. They knew they were going to get beat up in transport, whatever. This thing happens to be solid walnut. It's all dovetail construction. But right here, this is his calling card. He's saying, this is the kind of work that I'm capable of. Why would you want to hire somebody else, right? I think that's fascinating. I just think that's really neat. This is all inlaid wood. I don't know who Mr. Smith was, but he was obviously fairly good at what he did, So I really just think that's a neat piece. And I can tell you I've turned down a pretty fair chunk of change for this already. I took it to a tool show one time for just a display item. And I turned down 2 or 3 offers at the tool show. So again, I'm not going to say what, but they were pricey. They were pricey. All right, are these not the coolest hedge clippers you've ever seen in your life? They cut on the push and the pull. How cool is that? You just go along and trim your hedges. Is that not neat? I saw these out here on Highway 51 at a garage sale. I had to have them again. You can't walk away and leave that stuff behind. I would have had to lose, I'd have lost my man card if I'd have left those behind. That's all I can say. So, this is it's just a lawn edger for your driveway. It looks like a hockey stick with an attitude, right? But you would just roll it across the drive like that and it would cut the grass. Pretty neat stuff, Got some old shovels over here. The old tool chest here. I got a great deal on this. I bought it at the Tulsa Flea Market on the fairgrounds 3 or 4 years ago. I walked up to the guy and said, how much? He goes, $50. I couldn't get my money out of my pocket fast enough. It even has the front cover here to cover the drawers. So it's in really good shape. It was not full of tools, no. But I didn't care. I was okay with that, Some antiques you can clean up and you don't hurt the value. Tools, kind of somewhere in the middle. I knocked the dirt chunks off of them, and I cleaned up just a little, but it's never shiny, it's never polished, you never spray paint, you don't do any of that stuff, So everything you see here of mine is pretty much original, I wax it, I use a lot of wax, is what I use. In this cabinet, I've got some little oilers, little oil cans. Guys, the coolest tool in my collection is right here, I think. It's a pair of scissors. They are beautiful. You can come look. They're probably 1780 to about 1820. They're very, very early English scissors. Is that not gorgeous? They've got some scroll work turnings on them. There's not a speck of discoloration in the steel. It is shiny, shiny steel. Great quality steel. Came over from Sheffield, England. Beautiful stuff. I've got some glass cutters here. I've got a little thing over here, and I'm going to say this right now. Here's my disclaimer. I do not have a dark side, a morbid side in me. I'm not that kind of guy. But I have a collection of coffin wrenches over here. And they were wrenches that when you would shut the lid of the coffin, by the way, does everybody know the difference between a coffin and a casket? There's a difference. Why would they have 2 names, right? There's a coffin and there's a casket, right? Do you know? Or are you just blocking the sun? Oh, you're blocking the sun, aren't you? I thought you were holding your hand up. So a coffin is the square or rectangle box, okay? A casket is the one that's dumped and then diagonals out and diagonals back in and then a flat foot. That's the casket. It comes from the word cask, like a barrel maker, right, or something, right? Anyway, coffin and casket wrenches. So when they shut the lid, they had a mechanism. They look like gas keys to turn on your gas fireplace. Is what they really look like. But every one of them say so-and-so's coffin and casket company, makers of brass, bronze, or steel coffins. It's kind of neat, And it was just so you could shut the lid, lock it down, so nobody could come in and steal Aunt Gertie's gold tooth. That's what it was for, okay? So I've heard before, I don't know, can someone in the room tell me if this is right, that the expression a dead ringer, they occasionally used to bury people that weren't quite dead yet, and so they would put a bell. Yeah, have you heard that? I don't know if is that true? Yeah. Okay, there you go. Yeah. So I've got a little meat cleaver over here. This was actually used for circumcision of chickens. No, guys, it's huge. I'm lying. Come on. It's a huge meat cleaver over here. It's used in the meat packing industry. And they would actually take that and split the beef in half. They'd make the sides of beef from that guy. Okay, they'd hang him and split him. I've got some old glue pots. The glue, they didn't have Elmer's back then. They had horsehide glue, right? And so it was like a double boiler. You had to keep it warm, and you had to, so that's what these are. And then I've got just a little sharpening stone. I've got a bung borer over there. That's what a bung in a barrel is, that tapered plug, right? It's the cork. And so that's what that is. So over here, I've got some just different screwdrivers and what we call tool handles. Guys, the tool handle is just, you've seen them. We've all seen them. It's that handle that's got half a dozen different bits in there that you can change out and put a screwdriver or a little chisel or whatever in there. I have a real weakness for those. I've got a whole box full of them at home, okay? So, an unusual screwdrivers. These are not just your screwdrivers. There's something unusual about every one of these screwdrivers in here. I've got ice skate sharpeners over here. So, I don't ice skate. I don't know how many of you guys do, but ice skating apparently was a thing to do. And they used to skate on the ponds and the creeks and whatever, and I guess your skate blades get dull. And so they made these ice skate sharpeners to carry in your pocket, and at some point you could take it off and sharpen the blade of that skate back up and then skate on. So why do I have a collection of skate sharpeners? I don't have a clue. It's a tool, and coupled with my sickness, you gotta have them. So I have a whole collection of these things. These are the tire gauges down here, guys. And this is the way they work. It's just, you would put it on your tire right there, and this little piece would go bloop, and it would tell you how much air you have in there. Not unlike what we have to this day, right? This is a Schrader gauge. Schrader is still the valve that's on your valve stem on your car tire to this day. It's a Schrader valve, okay? This big green thing in the middle is just a grown-up advertising version of one of these. It's what it is. So that would sit on the counter in a garage or a gas station. The back of it actually opens up, and they would keep these guys in there, or Schrader valves, or whatever parts for those things. Right here, again, I mentioned to you earlier that I'm a level fanatic, right? So look, I have a level in my pocket as well. And it's a duplicate of one of the ones in here. And these are called pocket levels. But you notice this little groove in the bottom of it here, and you notice there's a screw on the side of it here. Anytime you can increase the length of your level, the more accurate you make it, correct? We all agree with that, right? So why would I want to use a 3-inch level if I can extend the length of it? Well, it's handy to carry in my pocket, but I would take this, and I would take it and put it on a framing square. We've all got framing squares out on the job sites, right? If we're building a house or whatever, they would hook this to the leg of a framing square. And so now I just made my level this long. Plus, if I want to pick it up and use it, I can now use it, put it on a stud, and I can use it to plumb that stud, assuming that my square is square and my level is working fine, then I can actually use that to plumb this stud right here. So it was kind of an ingenious little gadget that they could use, pair it with another tool, and it made some other fancy little stuff, And then the bottom here are more conventional type levels, various sizes, shapes. One of my favorite ones is this kind of dark chocolate brown one right here in the middle. He mounted the vial on the outside of the level. Instead of being mounted into the wood, it's mounted on the surface of the wood. He's the only guy, I think it's Watts was his name. He's Boston, 1850s. He's the only maker known that did that. Why he did it, I still to this day don't know what his logic was. But it's kind of an unusual little twist on levels. So there's one level down here. It's down here on the ground. It's copper colored. Just found this out in the last 2 or 3 months. We knew that there were a few of these copper colored Stanley levels out there. We knew that they were World War II era. We didn't know why. Why were they copper? There were some guesses here and there. Finally, somebody found some old paperwork that said it, and he printed it. And what it was, you can't, first off, Stanley made two versions of this level. They made a japanned one, which is just black. They made one that was nickel plated, okay? You can't nickel plate cast iron. That's what that level's made out of. The only way you can nickel plate cast iron is you have to copper plate it first. The copper will stick to the cast iron, then the nickel sticks to the copper, okay? These guys were on the production line that had already gone and been copper plated. They had not been nickel plated yet, and the war broke out. They said, stop, everybody, all these metals are now, rationed and whatever. They asked Stanley, they said, what do you want us to do with these? They said, sell them like they are. So Stanley sold these copper ones that had been copper plated, and they're very scarce. They're very scarce. The fact that and I found one day, again, at a local flea market, happened to stumble on one, paid the guy what he asked for it, and I think now that this news has come out, we kind of know the history more now. It's probably driven the price up to some degree, but I don't know that. That's just an assumption on my part, actually. But it's still kind of a neat piece. The World War II era, right at the beginning of the war, and they said, stop. I just think that's kind of neat. So these are Davis levels. Everything in this case is made by the Davis Level and Manufacturing Company. Remember how at the first I was talking about how they made things pretty? Davis took it to the extreme. These are beautiful cast iron levels, all the filigree. They had gold pinstriping on some of them. Just gorgeous, gorgeous tools. Highly sought after to this day by collectors, okay? Fairly pricey. Beautiful, beautiful tools, very high quality tools. The last thing I've got is this big case right here. Everything in that case is an inclinometer. So it shows the incline. So you put it on an inclined surface, and it will tell you what degree that is. You're on a 27-degree incline or whatever it happens to be. Every one of those show an incline. The one in the middle, the big tall wood one in the middle that's got the single silver plate on the top of it, yes, that one right there, came from Lahoma, Oklahoma, just west of Enid, a few miles. 1907, it was patented a few months before Oklahoma became a state. Kind of neat, I think. So some of those are just really unusual shaped. Some of them had more than just one function, but they all are inclinometers in there. And I have a thing for inclinometers, and I got to tell you, they are scarce as hen's teeth. You can't hardly find them. When I find them, I usually snatch them up pretty quickly. I'll tell you the one here on the right, this one closest to you, sir, that little square one that's not real pretty. Yeah, that one. I found that a few months ago, Tulsa Flea Market. Was over there walking around and found it laying on a table, and the guy wasn't there. The booth was empty. So what do you think I did? I camped out. I held onto that thing like this. I didn't set it down, and I waited, and probably 20 minutes later, the guy finally came back to his booth. And I said, is this yours? And he said, yep. And I said, how much? And I honestly didn't know what it was. I had never seen that particular one before. I'll go ahead and tell you guys, he said, $40. I said, would you take 30? And he goes, nah. He said, this is the first time I've ever had it out. He said, I just bought it this last week in Kansas at a farm sale. And he says, first time it's made its debut. He says, I think I'm going to stick at 40. And I said, okay. Took it home. I gave him $40. Took it home. Started digging through my books. I have a library of books that kind of tell you about this stuff, right? I'm not going to tell you the price, but I will tell you I was amazed. Well, folks, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.